The war had reduced the country to ruins. Streets that once echoed with laughter were now buried under rubble and smoke. 9-year-old Amina had seen more suffering than most would in a lifetime. She had lost her parents in an airstrike, and in the chaos of war, her siblings had vanished without a trace. That day, Amina had been sitting with her family at the dinner table when a deafening explosion shattered everything. Darkness engulfed her. When she opened her eyes, she was surrounded by dust and debris. Her ears rang, her body ached, and then she saw them, her mother and father, lifeless on the cold ground. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, but before she could even process what had happened, survival instincts took over. She ran. For days, she wandered through the ruins, hiding from the soldiers, scavenging through the wreckage for food. Her small body trembled from hunger, her eyes filled with tears she no longer had the strength to shed. In the dead of night, she curled up in the corner of a bombed-out building, wrapping herself in a thin, tattered blanket. The sound of distant gunfire echoed in the wind. She knew she had to run again, but her legs refused to move. When Amina was finally taken to a refugee camp, she barely reacted. She sat in silence, staring blankly at the ground. The relief workers tried offering her food, but she wouldn't take it. A piece of bread was placed in front of her, but she just looked at it, unmoving. Days passed, and she still wouldn't eat. Hunger had nearly claimed her life, but now it didn't seem to matter to her anymore. Surviving had lost its meaning. At night, she withdrew into the darkest corners of the camp, wrapping herself in a thin blanket, wishing she would never wake up again. Around her, other children sobbed in their mother's arms. Some cried for their lost homes, others for their families, and some for the lives they barely remembered. But Amina, she didn't cry. She had been afraid for so long that even fear had abandoned her. One evening, she overheard a child in a nearby tent whisper to his mother, "Mom, when are we leaving this place?" Something inside Amina shattered, because she knew she had no home to return to, no mother to reassure her, no father to hold her hand. She was truly alone. One morning, when a camp worker entered her tent to check on her, they found her lying still on the cot. Her pale face was drained of color, her breath faint. Hunger and dehydration had pushed her to the very edge of life. Immediately, the medical team was called in. They did everything they could to revive her, but as they worked, whispers spread through the camp. "She's too weak. She's been through too much. She won't recover. She's just a shadow now." No one knew that fate had something else in store for Amina. That very day, from thousands of miles away, a woman was making her way to this very camp. And when she arrived, Amina's life would change forever. When Angelina gently took Amina's hand, the girl's fingers were ice cold, just like the emptiness in her eyes. At that moment, Jolie understood once again that war didn't just destroy cities, it shattered innocent souls. Amina's gaze held a silent scream, a reflection of everything she had endured. Angelina didn't want to overwhelm her, so she simply sat beside her in silence, waiting patiently. But Amina remained unresponsive. After a while, Jolie turned to the aid worker beside her and whispered, "How long has she been like this?" The worker sighed, shaking her head. "Since the day she arrived, she hasn't spoken a single word. Most children, at least, cry or scream in grief. But Amina, she just stays silent. She was alone for so long in the war that she might have forgotten how to express emotions." Angelina's heart clenched. How could the world allow a child's voice to be silenced like this? How could such a small body carry so much pain? A deep sorrow mixed with quiet rage filled her chest. No child should have to endure this. Just then, Amina slightly lifted her head. For the first time, she met Jolie's gaze. Her eyes were filled with stories of unbearable loss, stories she was too afraid to speak. Angelina felt a lump in her throat. This little girl didn't just need help. She needed someone to restore the hope that had been stolen from her. Fighting back tears, Angelina gently squeezed Amina's hand and made her a promise. "I swear to you, sweetheart, you will never be alone again." Amina took a breath, so faint that it was almost imperceptible. It was the first sign that deep inside, there was still a spark left in her. But there was still a long way to go. Angelina stayed in the camp for days, never leaving Amina's side. She spoke to her softly, told her stories, encouraged her to eat. At first, nothing changed. Amina remained quiet, emotionless, but day by day, something shifted. She began to recognize Angelina's presence, to expect her visits. One evening, as Jolie sat beside her, Amina did something unexpected. She picked up a small piece of bread and silently held it out to her. It was the first time she had voluntarily given something to someone. Angelina's eyes welled up with tears. This small act was proof. Amina still carried kindness in her heart. She was still capable of trust. Gradually, Amina began to speak. Not much at first, just single words, then short sentences. She was still fragile, but she was healing. One night, with tears in her eyes, she whispered a question that changed everything. "Can you take me away from here?" At that moment, Angelina knew she couldn't leave Amina to fate. She would do everything in her power to give her a future. Angelina did everything she could for Amina. First, she ensured the little girl was moved to a safe place where she could be properly cared for. Then, she arranged for her to receive an education. Slowly, Amina began to smile again. She laughed. She played, she dreamed of a future. 1 year later, she was no longer the silent, lifeless child Jolie had first met. She was healthy, full of life, and eager to embrace the world. Every time Angelina visited her, Amina ran into her arms, showering her with endless stories of what she had learned and how much she had grown. One day, Jolie asked her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Amina's answer made her eyes well up with tears. "I want to be just like you, someone who helps others." Angelina wiped away her tears and smiled. A child's fate had been rewritten, but more importantly, Amina now knew she would never be alone again. Even the smallest act of kindness can change a person's fate, just like how Angelina Jolie changed Amina's life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. A small gesture can make a big difference.